All right. Hi there. This is Kaya, and it is time for our Module 7 screencast. Oh, and I'm just noticing a change that I need to make. I put on there this was going to be Chapter 6, 7, and 8. And actually, there's specific questions coming up. So, pardon me as I delete that on my slide. The first question that I'm going to take a look at is how can inquiry change educational paradigms? I watched the video again, and I actually really like that video because it really kind of puts it in real terms, the direction that we've gone in education. So I really like how inquiry does quite a few things that I believe that can really change the model that we have today. But I have to say, one of the foundations that I think is going to really be important is this constant idea of inquiry, these questioning. We're encouraging questioning. We always used to say, there's no such thing as a stupid question or a bad question. And I feel like we've gotten out of the truth of that. People may still say it, but they don't mean it. And my experience in school, as well as a student, as well as a teacher, we are not encouraged to ask questions anymore. I like to ask why a lot. I ask a lot of questions. That's my learning style, and I'm not rude about it. But when I ask why, people have shared with me that they feel like I'm being disrespectful, like I'm questioning their authority. And the reality is I'm just trying to wrap my head around a concept or an idea or a process or whatever. So teaching students and encouraging them to ask more questions, and that it's okay to ask questions and how to ask them, I think is going to be important. The other thing I think how inquiry is going to change and impact education is by giving students a voice. This specifically refers to the student-centered inquiry process, where it's not just teachers lecturing saying, write me a paper on this topic, that students have the choice and the flexibility to express what they're interested in after asking their own questions. I also think that that's going to be very empowering for students. The idea that again, they have a voice and they have a choice in what they want to learn and potentially how they want to learn it. I think moving away from the teacher directed lessons is going to be interesting, because I think there's a lot that we can learn from students as newer generations come along and do new things and show new things. I think we have to remember that as adults, we don't know everything. And then also, I think the critical thinking concepts and teaching students to think critically and make connections goes beyond the memorizing facts. For me, that memory connects to third grade and having to learn all the multiplication facts for math. And interestingly, I hated that, but I remember it very vividly. And so I think if we can really kind of connect some of these ideas, rather than just sit down and, force kids into just memorizing information, I think that that's going to really change an educational shift, because like I said, that's a very strong memory for me for third grade, and I don't have a lot of memories of my younger days. Second question was, how can a multidisciplinary approach change educational paradigms? I think I mentioned this in the Flipgrid, but I read this chapter, and at first it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I already do this as a first grade teacher. I spent a lot of time trying to connect some of these topics and processes, because I don't have a lot of time. I mean, by the time you think about 6 hours a day and getting kids started and getting kids packed up at the end of the day and bathroom breaks and transitions, there's not a lot of time. And so really the best way to use your time and to strategize your day is to connect things all day long. That also makes it more meaningful for kids. Although, having said that, I can see the power of this for middle school and high school. And I think it lends itself to reality as an adult. A lot of things in our lives connect. We don't segment aspects of our life much. So making these connections, I think, is a really good way for students at a young age to start seeing how the world is connected. And I also think using these critical thinking skills across subjects, the idea that we have to problem solve in math in a similar way for how we problem solve in science, I think is an important concept that a lot of people don't think about. We think, oh, math is one thing and science is another. So connecting the two, I think, would be important. And then also collaboration. For me, that's the biggest thing throughout this and throughout the master's program. Quite frankly, I've gone on to the idea that collaboration, kids learn through discussion, kids learn through groups. We've looked at so many different theorists and psychologists who say that development of language and culture, collaboration, working together, talking, discussing, socializing, playing. That's such a key component of learning in our lives, that collaboration, not only through student partnerships, but also through the subject matter, I think is important. And I think that can also change the paradigm, especially if we practice that. We all talk about, yes, collaboration is important, but how do we actually apply that daily, weekly, monthly, that sort of thing within a classroom, I think is important. And the last one, what could this look like with your students? I really feel like as a primary teacher, I think one of the things I can do to contribute and impact student inquiry or inquiry-based learning is to set a foundation, the foundation of asking questions and working through what question do you really want to ask. And so coming up with a daily question that may or may not have anything to do with school, encouraging this natural curiosity, I think is important. And something that I learned in college was for every answer that I come up with, I create 10 more questions. And I think we need to teach kids at a young age that that's okay, that natural curiosity needs to be developed. And I think we need to keep it. So for me, I think coming up with, I think I mentioned in maybe the post, one of the things that my kids love to do is ask Siri. So the Siri on my phone is a British guy. Like all women, I like the British accent. Sorry about that. And so my Siri is a British guy. And so the kids love to ask a question, and they just asked, what was the tallest building? And so we asked Siri, what was the tallest building? We will sometimes ask Siri how to spell a word. We will, ask Siri questions throughout the day. And I think that I can really kind of expand on that in teaching kids how to focus on questioning by using that technology that I have that I love to also encourage their natural curiosity. Also reflection. This is something I've done a few times, but for whatever reason, it didn't stick. It didn't hit me until today. Sometimes I'll ask kids when I notice that something doesn't go well, or I feel like something doesn't go well, I'll ask them what was hard about that. So I'll gather everybody back on the rug and say, what was difficult about what you just did? And I always get responses that they think I want to hear. I think, if that makes sense. For example, if we're doing independent reading, after a shared reading lesson, I'll send kids off by themselves or with partners to go try on a new reading strategy or a vowel team or a phonics rule or whatever, and say, go read by yourself. And then if after 2 minutes they're getting really wiggly, I'll pull them back to try to figure out what happened. And I'll say, what was hard about that? And 4 out of 5 kids will say, figuring out the tricky word, because they think that's what I want to hear. But maybe one of them will come back and say, it was really hard to focus because of the noise, or it was really hard for me to think because I didn't like my book. So getting kids to start thinking about what was difficult, or what did they learn, or how did they learn it? Or better yet, could I use this in math, or could I use this in science that afternoon? I think teaching kids how to be thoughtful and how to reflect could be a really good foundation, especially at the kinder and first grade level. I also think role playing. I really liked the article from the teacher in South Korea. I think that's where she was from. And she, interestingly, I was thinking about it from the concept of culture, because some cultures don't talk with children, they talk to them. So I specifically picked that article hoping it would sort of have more to do with enculturation within the classroom, but it didn't, but that's okay. But I like how it was a map activity and then different locations, and then it went into different areas with which the students were able to really explore, and eventually drawing a map of the community and then different stores. So I really like how she did that, but then she took it further, and the kids role played communicating or interacting with different people at locations on the map. So for example, I really like the idea, and how I could do it, how I could integrate this is, let's say we're looking at our community, which is a first grade standard, and what's within my community. And we look at the grocery store. So we could role play going to the grocery store and looking for certain foods, asking certain questions, but then we could also role play paying for those things. And that could also integrate math. So I really like how that played out. So I thought that could be something that I could integrate into the classroom as a lesson to really start getting kids to thinking in a different way than what I'm currently asking them to do. The other one I liked was the recycled art. And this one's big because tomorrow's Earth Day. We just went to the zoo. We've been talking about recycling. And actually, this is something that practically I could start working with them on this next coming week. But we, often will go outside and pick up trash to help our school and to help our environment. And we could take some of that trash and bring it back into the classroom, and we could create artwork. And since, of course, open house is coming up, that could be a really good project, but it could also lend itself to science and the concept of recycling. It could be an artistic process. It could definitely go towards our visual and performing arts, but also it could be connected to math, because there's a certain weight that we can only allow on a certain type of paper if we're going to hang it up, or there's a certain width that we can use if we're going to put our art in a frame. So I think that could be a project that we could do that would really connect some subjects and some themes with that would also be a really quick and engaging process for the kids. So I think that's something, and I got that from the South Korean article too, by the way. So I thought that would be something I can incorporate. Again, my apologies for rambling and making this so long. Thanks. Bye.